the end of the day, the Sandhurst motto is serve to lead, but that's what we've all done in the military, whatever level we were at. We have been serving our community by providing the protection for them, whether that be on home soil or by delivering that defence forward in Afghanistan or Iraq, or wherever it is, to ensure that our people at home can sleep safely in their beds.
We're back at the London Scottish Institute at Bear Arms Military Support to TV's amazing podcast studio. And we are taking a bit of a look this week at the devolved government. I'm really pleased to say we've got James Phillips with us, who is the Veterans Commissioner for Wales, a veteran himself. And how have you been? Because we met each other at the Parliament event, but how's it been since then?
Yeah, it's always it's busy. It's been a busy time. Remembrance obviously is an important time in the veteran calendar, and that in itself has been busy. But it's also been it's quite a lot of conferences and initiatives around the veteran space. So OVA held a conference, the Office of Veterans Affairs. There was a conference for the Covenant, the Armed Forces Covenant, which MOD held, and then working and visiting projects and initiatives in Wales which veterans are involved with or for the betterment of veterans.
I do say, I think someone said to me that Germany was the soul of the British Army in the 1980s and 90s into the 2000s. I think the Chinook is the beating heart of the armed forces, and perhaps Wales are the blisters of many people.
Yeah.
Because obviously the Wales, Brecon, Senny Bridge, will be names that are synonymous with anyone that has served in the armed forces. Indeed, any civilians will know and assign Wales to the military. Myself, I went to the University of Wales, Aberystwyth, and was in Wales OTC, so I spent a lot of my weekends down in the Brecon Beacons. But your links to Wales, it's a place close to your heart, right?
Yeah, so my wife is from Wales. I first sort of fell in love with Wales, not in Senny Bridge, funnily enough, but in Pembrokeshire, when I was just doing my young officers training as a Royal Artillery officer, as an air defence officer, and I was down at Manorbier on the coast in Pembrokeshire, which was still is the air defence range. Where we were firing at that time Javelin missiles, but Javelin in those days used to be anti-aircraft, not anti-tank missiles, completely different missile, more like the HVM. And sort of fell in love with this place. And then I joined a unit that was go there every year for its firing camp from Germany. And I met my wife there, and then sort of connection has been, she's a native Pembrokeshire girl, and the connection has been ever since then. So we bought a house there back in the noughties, and then settled back there when I finished my career last year.
So relatively new service leaver from the armed forces. So we'll come on to that in terms of that experience of your transition. But one thing, why did you join the armed forces in the first place? Was there sort of a family link?
So there was, but peripheral. My father did national service. My grandparents had my one grandparent had been in the Great War and then Home Guard, and another grandparent had been protected profession. He was a policeman in the Second World War. But I had uncles that had served in both campaigns. There was a family connection through that to the Royal Artillery, and I think when you're trying to join any organisation, any links you can play on and utilise in terms of history and heritage are important. So I looked at Royal Artillery. It was a big, much bigger in those days. I think I had 26 regiments or something when I joined in 1989, just as the Cold War was coming down. And I went at 15. In fact, I got a scholarship. So I, with the scholarship scheme of those days, had a regular commission at 15, which I did go to a fee-paying school. But, my parents were not wealthy by any means. My mother was a teacher, my father worked in insurance, and that helped take me through the sort of sixth form period of that school, Hampton School. Give it a plug. And I'd always wanted. I think I just always wanted to join the army. I think in those days, in the sort of 70s and 80s, growing up, there was a lot of war movies on. Still a lot of sort of heritage from World War II, airfix, building model kits, airfix soldiers. Everything. In the playground, you're either playing football or you were playing war. You were sort of playing around as soldiers, and that's all I really wanted to be. So at 15, I sort of made a decision to sign up. And then it just rolled on from there. There were times when I was at university and things where I thought, maybe I could do something else. But actually. I didn't, and I've had a 33-year career, and it's like any career, there's ups and downs. I've enjoyed most of it. There's been times where it's been shit, and there's been times where it's been cold, wet, uncomfortable, scared, shot at, pissed off. But on the whole, you look back at it and think, yeah, that beat working for a living, didn't it?
Well, your career, 33 years, that spanned from, the kind of dying days post-Cold War through to a high tempo of operations, Iraq, Afghanistan. Yeah. There are any particular highlights from that?
I think everyone has their war, don't they? Mate, first of all, when I was at Sandhurst, I got through Sandhurst playing rugby, and we went. So in those days, the graduate course was 6 months, and which sounds I only did 6 months at Sandhurst, but they basically took 1 year and crammed it into 6 months for graduates. But I was playing rugby for the academy, and we went on a rugby tour to Berlin in winter of 1989.
Wow,
absolutely incredible.
What was the atmosphere like then?
It was amazing. So the wall was they'd one breach in the wall. Still, all the checkpoints were still running and valid. You still had to go in blues and stuff like that to go across. But it was you just felt you're on the cusp of history. And I think I've sort of, a bit like surfing, I seem to have hit at various points those sort of peaks of history. So there was that. I then joined the army, joined a unit in the dying days of BAOR. It was all a bit listless. No one really knew what was going on. As an orderly officer, you had a folder, an A4 binder folder, which was about that big, of which 7/8 of it was all about crash out for war, and that was all invalid now. And the 1/8 of it, which was about calling out the plumber for Gunner Smith's wife, which was all the stuff you did as an orderly officer then, was all you used. And
good times in Germany, yeah.
Everyone just felt a bit aimless, But then Gulf War came along, didn't it? Almost immediately, and then suddenly you'd taken this behemoth of the British Army, which was facing Third Russian Shock Army, and you suddenly had to paint everything, literally paint everything sandy colour and turn it around and put it on ships to go out to Saudi Arabia. And I remember as a troop commander, looking at my Ferret armoured car, which was up on blocks, and had clearly not any worked on it for about 3 years, and thought, have I got to go to war in that? Fortunately, I didn't. I went to war on a CVRT, but there were people that went there in Ferrets. There were, we talk now about how old our equipment is, but there was equipment there which dated back to just after the Second World War. Some of the Avery equipment, the engineering equipment, and things like that. Cutting around in Ferret scout cars and stuff.
I remember the time when I graduated from university. Unfortunately, my regular commission career didn't pan out that I wanted it to, so I had to wave everyone off to Sandhurst. But be careful what you wish for, because you end up somewhere hot and sandy anyway. But I remember that time there was very much a clear message, because it was just 9/11 just happened, and it was like, right, you are going to war, you lot. How did the guys and girls transition from that, like the kind of malaise, as it were, of the end of the Cold War in Germany to war fighting?
Yeah, I think we were fortunate that it was another armoured war, so it was taking the equipment and the tactics and the experience that they had, and as I say, literally painting it sandy colour and going to a desert as opposed to going to West German plains. So it was the same formations, same equipment. So they were actually sort of drawing on skills and memory that they had within the corporate memory. So I think that was fortunate. If we'd had to reorientate to go to something like Afghanistan, I think we'd have had the same sort of trials and tribulations as we saw in Afghanistan in the early days. I think that was fortunate. You saw very much that it was very much an armoured war with armoured divisions and armoured brigades, and that's how it's fought. And actually, I think going from temperate Western Europe to the desert is relatively easy. It's a sandbox. It's quite easy to play soldiers and to have utilise your tactics and use them in armour formations easily. Whereas if you were going to an urban warfare or something like that, it would be far more difficult.
And of course, we've all had to switch in and out of those environments. So I did an urban tour of West Belfast before uni as an infanteer, and then Afghanistan in my early 30s. Counterinsurgency operation, very very different. You've dipped in and out of those different doctrinal approaches.
Northern Ireland as well at a time which was I think when that was now. I think it was about 91, 92, just after the Gulf War. So I got this unit with the Gulf War, And in the mess there, everyone was talking about they just got back from Cyprus, so it was all about dits about Cyprus and drinking stories and on the pull in Cyprus, and it was all a bit boring. Then we went to the Gulf War, and I thought, oh, great, we're going to get back to the mess, and of course we'd be part of the team, we'd have done it all, but of course no one got pissed there, no one had anything, there were no real sort of stories of daring do and women they got to know and drinking exploits. So it all flicked back to Cyprus again. But we were, as a unit, were being deployed then again to Cyprus. I thought, well, at least it will come along. And then it was options for change. It was a big Cold War dividend. And the CO got us on the square and said, 2nd Regiment, which was what we were, 2nd Field Regiment, is going to be cut one of the cuts in the options for change. So the regiment's going to be wound down. But don't worry, we've got an operational focus. And I thought, yeah, we're going to Cyprus. He said, we're going to go to West Belfast. So we went to West Belfast about 1991. I think there'd been a very initial, they tried to have a sort of peace treaty, it failed, so it was quite hairy on both sides. We were at Girdwood Park, I don't know if that's where you were. So we had the Ardoyne, New Lodge, Shankill, Tigers Bay, those sort of sectarian areas. And it was a very interesting tour, and it was formative again because we'd done armoured warfare, and then we were re-rolling to what we would term as conventional counterinsurgency in the old days. And I was just talking about this with someone last night over dinner. The fact that you could, we didn't get engaged or contacted on that tour. We had very good drills, and as long as you could prevent a cut-off for the terrorists to escape, they wouldn't engage you. But of course, you'll know from Afghanistan and Iraq that escape isn't necessary on the is one of the requirements of a Muslim fundamentalist, and so those tactics are very don't work.
No, different rules of the game, right? But I think as particularly for I've served alongside gunners, and their ability to I'm going to be generous here to the gunner community. We've got lots of listeners. We've got lots of listeners from the gunner community. But actually, as a former infantry and then intelligence corps, you kind of do your job as on the job description. But gunners, I've seen operate as ground holding troops. I've seen them operate, obviously, base-mounted UAVs for that kind of work, the eyes and ears of a base, and obviously in kind of gun role as well, armoured. Got quite an agile.
Yeah, you have to be.
Soldier.
I think the soldier's quite agile and adaptable. I think all our soldiers are. I think British infantry soldiers are. The level of technology, that's available now, and to the section level in terms of micro UAVs and thermal imaging and all the ISTAR and firepower that's available is exponential now at the fire team and section level. So I think gunners do have a wide range of skill sets and are quite adaptable. I think they whatever it is, they are a support arm, effectively, as supporting the ground troops. So whether that be providing air defence, providing fire support, providing ISTAR. On the whole, we're there as one of the critical support arms to deliver the key effect that the infantry or the armoured corps or in the air corps are trying to deliver as frontline troops.
Wow. Yeah, but what a career, 33 years. And
I never even got into my war there.
What is your war?
Well, I think Bosnia. So Bosnia, I think, was, went to Bosnia in 95, crashed out with 24 Mobile Brigade. Most of the brigades sat in Plochi, didn't go anywhere, but the gunners got up onto Mount Igman into Bosnia, into Gornji Bakuf and other areas, and we were actually there when we brought the Serbs to the table, effectively by delivering at that time significant amounts of fire support and ground air attack.
Was that when the Royal Welsh were in a bit of bother?
Various battle groups rolled through there, but yes, Devon and Dorset. So that's where Colonel, the MP now,
Colonel Bob from the Cheshires.
For the Cheshires. So he was very early there, wasn't he? But yes, all that. I was there at the time of Srebrenica. I was working with Dutch Marines, that was obviously Dutch Army. So that was a pivotal time. We felt we actually did some real good. We opened up Sarajevo. I remember sitting on Mount Igman, bringing in fire onto Serbian positions which had been mortaring the marketplace in Sarajevo, and then going down with I think it was a D&D battle group and driving in and liberating Sarajevo. So that was quite pivotal.
Cool. I mean, they talk about just war. That must have felt not righteous, but very, and it's difficult, isn't it? Because it's grim business that you're involved in. Grim business. Let's not hide away from that. But at the same time, knowing that you're preventing further loss of life of civilians.
Yeah, and it's not very often that you can bring a conflict like that to a close, and we were pretty much at that phase where we did, brought the Serbs to heel. Now that part of the world is still rumbling on. It's not cured by any means, and sometimes you get some elements of that was with the UN, and very quickly it then went across to NATO, for the sort of mopping up. But quite often it can be really unsatisfactory as a soldier working with a blue beret, because the rules engagement and your limited military resources and ability to act can be really frustrating, I think, as we saw with the Dutch in Srebrenica.
Yeah, and you use that phrase, your war, and there was a really good documentary BBC did called Our War, which spoke about Afghanistan. I think it's one of the best documentaries that's been made. A very good friend of mine, James Clark, was featured in that with the Mercians, and now he works within politics. And we've spoken at length about this. He said it's not something he really looks and watches again too often, but he felt very proud to produce that. That phrase, kind of having been involved in so many conflicts, do you think that's a common language that veterans use? Do you think there'll be particular standout moments that veterans will say, oh, actually, that was my war? Is that something you've encountered as you meet veterans?
I think it is. I think it's more difficult for our later generation of veterans, because some of them went back to Afghanistan so many times. So yes, I guess they might say about as their war, but maybe they'd see one pivotal tour. It was Herrick 15 or something like that. They will latch on to as being that specific period where they felt, for various reasons, might feel that they had real effect, or it might feel that it was a very harrowing. But I think it's that moment in time where you feel that something has, perhaps you have changed something or something has changed you, I think.
Yeah.
Is how you might epitomise that as sort of being your conflict.
Herrick
says all sorts of things, whether it's internal or external.
It does. Herrick 15 was mine. But I was 18 when I was in Northern Ireland, so definitely grew up. But I still go back. There's something about Afghanistan. I don't know. And obviously it was something that we arguably didn't win. And we left in quite difficult circumstances during the evacuation of Kabul and op pitting. So I think I share with you that sentiment that there is a moment you saw, that was my war, and our war. I like that our, because that sense of community. And I think our generation as well that are involved in that, who are working age, you're still working, and it encapsulates so many people in this country that have a lot of experience from different conflicts compressed over quite a short period of time.
Of course, for some people, some veterans, it's the Falklands, and particularly down in Wales, with the Welsh Guards and the sort of sacrifice that they made, and that has obviously had a very poignant time with the recent anniversary. And so, yes, I think it's very much, and we're seeing generations that are passing now, which were Second World War was their war, and we've got the national servicemen, which I think is probably a bit more problematic, because maybe them and a lot of people who served, there's a whole generation that served in the Cold War
and Korea,
where they were problematic, forgotten, but those there are vast swathes of servicemen who did all their service in Germany, as you said, with no medals to show for it or anything. But doing something which was absolutely fundamental, and we still haven't seen the end of now with Ukraine. No,
and it's important that they all feel included in the armed forces community writ large, and those opportunities, whether it be Remembrance, Armed Forces Week, where we can rub shoulders and swap different stories. I had it recently at a Mission Motorsport event down in Goodwood, where I was chatting to a Chelsea pensioner. And there was just this commonality, and then there was a World War II naval veteran, and there was just this unspoken, different generation, different conflict, but there was just something that bonded us, that's really quite special and a huge privilege. And you've settled, and from where you were living in Wales, and that's traditionally veterans do kind of get pulled back to those areas that they've lived and worked in the past and have a bond to,
or where their partner's from,
Very
common. I think with the military, there's a time where if your relationship has continued through long service, then there's a time, I think, where you have to give back, and not very often it's a time where the missus says, right, we've had your time, now we're going to go
Yeah.
what I want to do. And I think that's, a successful relationship or marriage or partnership works that way. I mean, you couldn't, you can't do 33 years of service without a family that's supporting and following you.
And
I think we have to think about veterans' families very much when we think about veterans as well, because quite often they have borne the brunt of that service, and then if you have a veteran that's in crisis, very often they are the carers or the supporters that are living with the conflict or the crisis that that veteran is in.
I think we're getting better at that, but we've been pretty bad at it in the past of talking up the valuable contribution of our partners, wives, spouses, husbands, and also our children as well, that are there whilst the person serving does what they do unquestionably, and to be able to, like you say, give back and ensure that life after service continues happily. I mean, I can think of worse places to settle than Pembrokeshire. I love Pembrokeshire, so
Yeah, it's a beautiful town.
I'm a bit biased towards that. But how has resettlement been for you?
Yeah, so resettlement was not rocky, but it was during COVID. So I was in a position working with NATO in a new headquarters called the Joint Support Enabling Command in a place called Ulm down in Baden-Württemberg near Munich. So I was I was the director of operations, setting up this new headquarters, which was effectively a support headquarters for the rear area, for that old BA, that old sort of West Germany and European home theatre, to ensure that in time of crisis or conflict with Russia, effectively, we could rapidly reinforce the front line, and to ensure that there was enough stores and stocks and support and training areas and main supply routes to quickly allow US, Canadian and NATO troops to get to the front line. So that was the sort of role of that headquarters, and I thought I was there till the end of my career. Unfortunately, NATO being NATO and nations jockeying for positions, UK decided that actually instead of the Colonel OF5 level position I was in, they wanted to put a 2-star into that headquarters to get a bit more leverage, and my position got cut at a 2-year point where I thought I'd be working for 3 years out to the end of my service. So I then had 18 months of rump, end of career, but it was COVID, so I ended up going back to UK and back to Pembrokeshire, working from home on a project which was all part of making savings in the training area, basically how quickly we could close down and reduce Winchester as a training centre and centralise a lot of the basic training, which was not the way I wanted to end my career. It was a bit depressing. It always is when you're looking at savings and costs and cutting. But then, fortunately, Ukraine came along. I had worked previously before I went out to Germany as a crisis manager with MOD, working on the Crimean crisis amongst others. So I stuck my hand up, rang up Glasgow and said, you must be looking for people who've got experience. Fortunately they were, so then I got seconded into MOD on the crisis team then to deal with Ukraine. So actually I did end up on a bit, finish on something which felt a bit more valuable, a bit more of a high. And it was when I was in that role that I saw the commissioner role advertised on Twitter, actually. I think I saw it on, and I thought, actually, I'm coming to the end of my time. I've always been a people-focused person, and I thought, I'd like to do that. That sounds a good role, and I made some inquiries about it, applied, and lo and behold, I got the job. But I was been working shifts on the Ukraine crisis. I was driving back through the pouring rain down the M4 in a beaten up old Jeep with no hands-free, back for a weekend in Pembrokeshire, and the phone went. It wasn't a number I recognised, so I fobbed it off for a while. When I pulled into the services, I thought, well, I'll ring that number, and it was Simon Hart, Secretary of State for Wales. I thought, I was ringing to tell me I haven't got the job. And he said, yeah, James, we think you're ideal, we'd like you to have the job. And I thought, oh, great, okay. I said, I just need to have a bit of time to think about this, because it wasn't a full-time position, it was 100 days a year. So I thought, I've got to go from full-time employment to part-time employment, balance that. I said, so I need to discuss it with the family. He said, it takes some time, but I need to know on Sunday, because I want to announce it in the House on the St David's Day speech. So I had the weekend to decide whether I was going to leave full-time employment for a part-time role, and how I was going to manage that, and and resettle and do all that. So my resettlement was a little bit different. I managed to do some courses when I was from Germany, distance learning, and then I did a couple of courses just before I took up this role as well. But my resettlement and transition was slightly unusual.
But great that not obviously the circumstances, difficult to use the word great because there's a conflict involved, but professionally satisfying that you finished up on something so meaningful within almost full circle as well in that sense.
Yeah, Cold War.
Starting
at the end of the rump of the very end of the old Cold War, and then going through, as you say, a number of conflicts in different parts of the world, but then leading back full circle to the Cold War, effectively again, you're fighting Russians.
And not over lockdown, no leaving dues and getting dined out and all the rest of it.
Yeah, so all of that sort of didn't have any of that. That sort of went by the way. And in fact, I had a friend who was the retired SO2 running the range at Manabir. So on my last day, we went up there, and it's actually pretty much where I'd started my regular career. Was joining my unit from Germany. They were actually firing there at the range at Manabir. So that's where I'd started. Did my very first day as a troop commander, and then I did my last day in service.
No.
So I got
Special.
Me there. Yeah, that was nice. That was
nice
That was
touch.
Full circle in the same way that the sort of professional piece had gone full circle. Yeah, and then the next day I was working with veterans as a veterans commissioner.
As a veteran, and so you are the first veterans commissioner for Wales?
Yeah, first one for Wales. So Scotland's had one I think since 2016. Northern Ireland had one a little bit later. It was part of the current government, but you know what I mean when I say that. They've gone through various iterations of Conservative government now, but it was part of their manifesto, and their pledge to veterans was to, I think they were concerned that the devolved nations would not apply the covenant in the same way that they wanted it to be applied. I think actually they were erroneous in that assumption, but I don't think that the commission role was wrong. I think it's been very useful. And Scotland had one already, and they'd funded it through the Scottish government, and it was set up as part of Scottish government, and I think that was seen as a good idea. So UK government decided that they'd be rolled out to Northern Ireland and Wales. Northern Ireland adopted one, so that's funded by the Northern Ireland office and the Home Office because of the unique set of circumstances with legacy and the sensitivities of sort of the veteran community in Northern Ireland. And then the Welsh one was a little bit later. There was some toing and froing as to who was going to fund it, whether it's going to be a Welsh Government position or a UK position. I think Welsh Government were reticent because they were already funding the Armed Forces Covenant Liaison Officers in Wales at 7 of those, and they worked really well down at the tactical level with local government. And so they were sort of questioning whether they needed a commissioner as well. I think now if you ask them, they probably say it was a good idea, but actually they got away without funding it because it's being funded by Cabinet Office and Welsh Office from UK government, so they pulled a blinder there.
and what was it exactly? What's the remit of a veterans commissioner?
So
specifically for Wales? Yeah,
so it's to ensure that Welsh government and the local government that sits beneath it do deliver upon the promise that the Armed Forces Covenant makes, or that pledge it makes to the Armed Forces community. Particularly in my role, veterans, but there is, as I said, the Armed Forces Covenant Liaison Officers in Wales that look after the whole of the Armed Forces population in their region. But my role is specifically for the veterans. It's to ensure that specifically now with the due regard function, that due regard piece to those specified areas of health, education, and employment are applied within Wales, and that any law and legislation that applies to veterans in the UK as a whole is being taken up by Welsh Government in Wales, and to ensure that there is someone with a access who can speak on behalf of veterans and can advocate for veterans in Wales with not just Welsh Government but UK Government as well, but also can interact with the other commissioners to spread best practice, and also can come together as a collective voice on behalf of veterans across the UK, from the regions to lobby central government if there are issues, and to inform veterans of what's out there in terms of the covenant and support that they can get, to coordinate that support, particularly in the third sector where it can be stovepiped and even competitive, particularly in the competitive nature of the funding, and also to advocate on behalf of the veterans that we're not all bad, sad and mad. 90 90% plus of veterans transition very successfully into a second career, which I think we can talk about a little bit about that second career, where that can be in service and supporting their communities. Many do it voluntarily, some choose to do it as their next profession.
And are there any specific challenges within the veterans community in Wales that you're keen to address or find out?
Yeah, I think they aren't specific to Wales. The challenges that the veteran community face, I think, are common across the UK. They are just nuanced by the fact that a lot of the services that affect veterans' day-to-day lives are devolved. So, when you have an initiative like Op Courage in NHS England, we have to, that isn't necessarily going to roll out into Wales because the funding is for England only, and therefore we have to work out how Wales can deliver something which is similar within NHS Wales. It does. We have Veterans NHS Wales, which is a bespoke mental health pathway for veterans in Wales. But always it's just making sure that those, when those things are announced for England, that the devolved nations can deliver parity to veterans in their own communities, which can be challenging, particularly in the areas of health where NHS England, NHS Wales, NHS Scotland are on their uppers in terms of funding and resources. So it's not easy to deliver parity. I think we managed to do it, but I think we'd like most things in the veterans community, a lot of it's done on a shoestring and a wing and a prayer. A lot of it's done with the goodwill of veterans who are involved in these things, helping particularly in the third sector.
And you've got that challenge, as you've just highlighted, between devolved government and Westminster. What kind of skills have you had to lean upon from your military career to handle those relationships and competing priorities?
Yeah, so I think those skills that have gradually developed as a commander from Northern Ireland, where you're having to engage with a public which can at times be hostile, but also with policing and other agencies, through being a commanding officer and having a regional footprint with that, working with local communities, but also managing a large garrison, a large single unit garrison with families and quarters and things like that. But then also moving into one of my other roles as a defence attaché for Belgium, Netherlands and Luxembourg, where I was working representing UK MOD and the Chief of Defence Staff with Dutch, Belgian and Luxembourg MODs, but also with their foreign officers, and working with our own foreign office and high levels of politicians and officers of government. So that experience has enabled me to understand some of the complexities and challenges that politicians face and that civil servants face in supporting them, and therefore work out how you can best persuade them of the benefits of helping veterans.
Many people ask me why I bang on all the time about why I think that veterans and reservists, and dare I say even spouses and partners, are brilliant in public facing roles once they leave. So going into local government is a big thing I evangelise over, or public appointed roles like that you're in. And you've just described exactly why people from our community are such a good fit for that, because all the skills that you learn on those operational high pressured environments, you're used to also rubbing shoulders with the likes of politicians, be they a local politician, remembrance at that level, or right up to the kind of strategic level as a defence attaché. So it's exactly those skills that make it an ideal fit. And then there's another layer, some work that I've been looking at recently is around trust. And the armed forces community in 2019, Ipsos Mori had an 81% trust rating. Politicians were at the bottom of those professions at 14%.
Below estate agents and bankers. Yeah.
But that's quite some doing. Well done, politicians. What an achievement. So I think closing the trust gap by having people like yourself in those publicly facing pointed roles can help, because it's a lot of responsibility, mind, because with that trust it's hard won but easily lost.
And I think we've seen over the last decade or two, we've seen an erosion of that trust, whether it be expenses scandal or with COVID, with fast track for PPE and things like that. We've seen the political class really not performing at their best.
Behaviours
which are poor. And I think in public office, the Nolan principle, the 7 principles of public service apply, which are very similar to our own values and standards within the Army. So I think, or the Navy or the Air Force. So I think that code of conduct and practice, which is ingrained in us through military service, is one which we bring with us when we transition out into civilian life. And I think that at the end of the day, the Sandhurst motto is serve to lead, but that's what we've all done in the military, whatever level we were at. We have been serving our community by providing the protection for them, whether that be on home soil or by delivering that defence forward in Afghanistan or Iraq, or wherever it is, to ensure that our people at home can sleep safely in their beds. And that is it's got to be the most fundamental and most important role within society, is it not? To guard the gates. And that's what we've done. And that is what the Covenant's all about, is paying us respect and due regard for that service and potentially the ultimate sacrifice that many of us have made, whether that be ultimately in terms of loss of life or through significant wounds and damage, and that could be physical or mental, that scarring. And that's what the Covenant's all about. And I think we have that ingrained, so it's quite easy for us to, when we leave, to step into roles where we continue to serve, and we see value in that, and we hold it in quite high regard. And I think it doubly hurts us when we see people who are in that position of trust betraying it.
Does. It is hurtful when you see that, because you just think, that saying, the standard you walk past is the standard you set yourself, and it's behaving correctly when others aren't looking.
Yeah.
And that's what hurts so much when you see, but at the same time,
the DS aren't watching, you're still
when they aren't, DS watching, directing staff, and of course, right, they're watching, or the PTI is watching, right, quick, more press ups. We've all been there. But you're right, it's that integrity piece, and which is why it is hurtful when you see poor behaviours, because you're like, well, that's not what we're used to. The values and standards are compatible with the principles in public life, known as the Nolan principles. And any listeners that aren't familiar with them, do look them up, because you'll see some familiarities, and it's like a checklist of actually how the armed forces behave. And it's not just me saying it or us saying it, James. It's actually data. Ipsos Mori found that we are trusted, and there's a reason for that, and that's those values and standards. And you mentioned also about the role of the armed forces champions within communities in local government. What's your experience been of local government?
Yeah, so it's mixed. It's I've only been in the role 16 months, and it's been an extremely challenging time for local government. Funding is extremely tight. They're having to make some really difficult choices on what services they can continue to maintain. We're looking at provision of libraries and all those sort of things that we take as being important in the community, even sort of public toilets and things like that. Having to make really difficult decisions on how they continue to deliver or don't continue to deliver those services. And we see exactly the same in the sort of social housing sphere, and that's obviously one which impacts quite heavily on the veteran community, partly because, like me, they've been working away from an area and then they settle into a new area, and if they haven't got housing or the ability to purchase or privately rent housing, then they're going into sort of social housing, and it's how do they do that? Have they got the skill set, the connections to do that? Do they have the legacy of in that area of the heritage of living in that area, and therefore can show that they have need there? Fortunately, that's been addressed in England and in Wales now, in terms of not having to demonstrate that longevity of living in an area before you can be put on a list. But the pressure is such that there isn't enough social housing, and particularly if you're a single veteran, a young single veteran, you are going to be at the bottom of the pile for priority, because it will always be those with dependents and families that will be housed first. And so that's why, if we do see homeless veterans, and I welcome Op Fortitude and the pathway that's there now, but at the moment, Op Fortitude pathway doesn't deliver more bed spaces or crisis bed spaces. All it does is define the pathway and make that pathway easier. And in Wales, we have something like 38 crisis bed spaces for veterans, and they're full. So if those are full, and you can't move those veterans who are in it onto something more sustainable, then the system's log-jammed and broken. So that's housing is an area that I'm working very closely with Welsh Government on, and a number of the third sector providers. I welcome the capital money that's coming in now for Op Fortitude, which can be utilised to refurbish or build new bed spaces and crisis accommodation. But I don't think that this problem isn't just crisis accommodation. I'm very keen that we don't just provide crisis shelter for veterans, we provide homes for veterans, because so many veterans have got, they've got dependents, they need children that, they need access to children that they might be separated from, and they can't have them come and visit them if they're living in crisis accommodation. They need a home that they can welcome their children to and spend quality time with them. And if you've got a home, you've got a firm base, and then you get the wrap around that in terms of holistic care, which is provided through a lot of the charities in Wales that work in housing veterans. And with that comes confidence, employment, and suddenly those veterans are fulfilled. But if you're just sticking them in crisis shelter and they can't get out of it because there's nowhere to go to, they're very unlikely to succeed.
This just demonstrates how complicated and complex the homelessness issue is, because it's not just people just think it's a silver bullet of getting people off the streets, when there are so many other needs, the health needs, often complex needs like addiction as well. But you're right, in terms of moving them out of crisis and actually integrating them into the community, which is why local government is going to be so important, and which is why I also believe that having veterans in local government is so important, to have those champions who understand. I mean, you must have come across a few veterans serving in local government.
Yes, I've come across a lot of veterans serving in local government. There are armed forces champions in all the statutory sort of bodies within local government in Wales and in other parts of the UK as well. So DWP have got bespoke armed forces champions, many who are veterans, whose only job is to focus on veterans and their allowances and their welfare and support. But then if you look into local government in Wales, there is always an elected councillor who is the armed forces champion, and there'll be an officer as well, so a civil servant at the local level who will be a champion. And likewise in the health boards we have in Wales, there will be a clinical lead, but there'll also be an officer who is charged with looking at the covenant and support to that. Some health boards do that with two of them, in fact, in Cardiff and up in North Wales have got bespoke officers in their organisations whose only job is to ensure that the Armed Forces Covenant is supported and applied across the health space, and that's worked really well, and they've achieved veterans accreditation. Some of the other boards, one that looks after Pembrokeshire and Dyfed, where I am, have done it slightly differently by using their community team to do it, but they've achieved the same sort of level of status. My hobby horse would be to have those bespoke, discrete officers in each health board, but we're in challenging times, and they're looking at reducing officers, and staff, not increasing staff numbers. So that's a battle to fight again, is to persuade them that actually, having a staff member who is focused on delivering the covenant within their health board is valuable, and means that actually they'll improve services to veterans and therefore have better outcomes. And so I think those champions are critical, really important.
And they're your eyes and ears on the ground, right? They must have welcomed your arrival.
Well, the Armed Forces liaison officers, so that's another layer. They're slightly different. So they work they are employed, they are funded mainly by Welsh Government. Initially they were set up with Armed Forces Covenant Fund Trust money, but now Welsh Government have funded, have undertaken to fund those to at least 2025. And there's 7 of those covering the 7 sort of regions in Wales. And they work, they're embedded in local government. And their job is to educate staff in civil servants in the local government and elected officials about the covenant, about the armed forces community, but also to signpost the armed forces community to support and help within their local areas. They engage with schools. They engage with the SSE Cymru, which is a service schools organisation that supports service children in the schools, and so they work collectively to just ensure that that region that they work in is armed forces friendly and aware. And they are my eyes and ears on the ground, so very much so. Those armed forces liaison officers are great.
It's really important to talk about this as well, so we can try and make it difficult for that stuff to be removed in the future by future governments, whether they be devolved or national.
And also, I talked with where I engage with other with UK government, but also the Office of Veterans Affairs and the other commissioners about best practice. And I think it's recognised across the UK, those Armed Forces Covenant liaison officers in Wales are best practice, but they're expensive.
Yeah, of course.
That's 7 people who are employed full time to delivering that. And if you wanted to export that to England, how many would you need? we've got 7 in Wales. I mean, the good thing about Wales is it's a country that feels like a village. Everyone knows everyone, particularly the veteran and the armed forces community. It's a really well established network, and it's very easy to reach out and speak to people. But also, it's quite easy to reach out and speak to politicians in a way they're far more accessible, whether they be Senate members or MPs, perhaps than central government is in UK. It's more difficult to get time or engage directly with a minister or a senior politician in Whitehall than it is in Cardiff, and so that it's easier to get things done in Wales. But if you wanted armed forces commandant liaison officers in England, I think you probably need about 30. It would be very difficult to persuade local government to step up and do that. If we could, that would be brilliant, because I think they really do deliver the covenant at grassroots level.
Well, it sounds like you got your teeth stuck into the role pretty quickly.
We didn't even get to talk about me as a councillor.
Well, no, let's. Before we wrap out the episode, the other side of you, of course, has many facets to your resettlement, but you are also a local councillor.
Yes, I'm a local councillor at Tenby Town Council. So that's a community council. It's the lowest level of government. I mean, I haven't gone through an election process. I was co-opted. They had a shortage of councillors about a year after the local elections, and so they asked members of the community to come forward to volunteer to be councillors, and then we had to go through a selection process with the other with the councillors.
And they tend to be sort of apolitical, don't they? Really try.
Yeah, I'm independent, but there are we've got a couple on our council, and there's 11 councillors on the town council. A couple of those have got political affiliations, but on the whole, it's independent. And I think it's all very good, isn't it? You're sitting on the sideline and sniping and chipping and complaining about local services, but actually, I would advocate if you want to do something about it, you have to get involved, and you'll know that from being an agent and the work you've done and the work you do to try and get armed forces personnel and veterans involved in government at various levels. And if you look at most politicians, they've started at the grassroots level. There's not many like Johnny Mercer who've gone in at the
it's quite unusual.
The Premier League of politics. But also, I think on the whole, you want to change and improve the communities you live in. Tenby is a beautiful town, but there are issues with it. There are things that can be done and can be improved. And you can only really do that if you're sitting at the table making those decisions. So I'd advocate to anyone, don't be the barrack room lawyer that sits there chimping away and complaining. Actually step forward and go and do it, because all veterans and dependents of veterans and service families have got, as you said, skill sets which are really useful. From just whether it's sitting in a company or a battery or squadron level conference, sitting around a table, that's exactly what it's like, sitting around the table in the mayor's parlour in Tenby at a council meeting. You're having the same sort of discussions that you have in a military unit about resources, about tasks, about future programmes. It's no different. It's exactly the same. It's just taking the military language way and putting civilian language in.
Or a tribal shura with village elders in Afghanistan. Exactly. It is. I'll say it slightly in jest, but it's really true. It's that kind of environment.
Sitting on chairs, though. That's it.
Not on the floor, drinking lots of green tea with loads of sugar in it. Oh, the memories. I've been to Tenby pretty recently. Is there a law that has to make all the colours of the buildings? That's beautiful.
It sits in the national park, so if you're in the town, then there are certain palettes you can. National Parks Authority will allow you to paint your buildings in certain colours. So,
amazing. Yeah, and that's where kind of local government's important as well, to preservation of those communities.
Yeah, and it's a common. And you also realise that it's not. So we sit in the national parks, and National Park Authority has a voice. We have the very lowest level of government. Actually, a lot of the power sits at county level at Pembrokeshire County Council, which actually has a veteran as a chief executive officer. Will Bramble, who's another gunner, is the chief executive officer.
You get everywhere, don't you?
Pembrokeshire. So people will come to me and say, this 20 mile an hour limit, or the road signs, or one-way streets, or things like that. And unfortunately, as a town councillor, you don't have any control of that. It's all been, county council has all that sort of stuff. So there's very limited powers of the town council, and that's quite frustrating. But it's the first step of getting involved in politics, and you can have a voice and represent those people, and of course you can then engage with county council and try and lean on them and influence them to improve where you live. So I would advocate people to go and see, go and have a look. You can, council meetings are public. You can attend any of these meetings, and you can see what your councillors are actually doing for you. And if you don't like it, and plenty of people don't,
you know what to do.
Then actually get involved and get elected or get co-opted and change it.
Or stand up and serve again, as I say.
Exactly.
So what are your hopes for the future? With all this work, amazing positive work you're involved in, what are your hopes for Wales for the future?
Well, Johnny Mercer, who's the Minister for Veterans Affairs, has set a pretty stretching target for UK to be the best place to be a veteran by 2025, I think. And of course, I see that as the CO's directive, and I see myself as the Commissioner for Wales being one of the company commanders, and of course my directive is to make C Company or Wales the best place to be a veteran in the UK, and I think we're getting there. I think Welsh Government are very supportive. Wales is still, as I said, it feels a bit like a village. There's still a really strong community ethos there. They're incredibly proud of their armed forces. They're incredibly proud of the affiliations that they have with Royal Naval ships, HMS Severn, HMS Cardiff. They are very proud of having RAF Valley and having connections with, there's a lot of old airfields and World War II heritage for the RAF in Wales, particularly in Pembrokeshire, in Wolverhaven, where all the seaplanes and anti-submarine
Dale Airfield in Pembrokeshire,
all of those. And then obviously their regiments, very proud of the Welsh Guards and the Royal Regiment of Wales and the reserve formations that sit in Wales, and of course also the training estate that they have and the basing that's in Wales for the armed forces, which is actually going to increase with QDG, the Welsh Cavalry, coming home and being based in Wales in the next few years. And so they are proud. They recognise service. There's community is important. And so, some of those values we're talking about, Nolan principles or our values and standards from the armed forces, are still partly ingrained in Wales in a way that I think may have been dissipated a little bit more in England and other parts of the UK. Whether it comes from the valleys and mining and that sort of community spirit through sport and rugby and football. A lot of our veterans hubs are linked to community hubs or to community organisations like rugby clubs or football clubs, and so they partner and support veterans to have a space, a safe space to gather and to sell dits, a bit like we are now, but also to solve problems. It's the veterans hubs, which are throughout Wales, are places where service providers can come and meet veterans and educate them on what's out there, and spaces for people to engage with veterans, as well as veterans to just hang out and to talk with other like-minded, sensible, sane individuals that we all are, and take a break from the chaos that's out there in Civilian Street.
Wow, and how might people look up the work or the Veterans Commissioner or any of those people that you mentioned? How might people get involved in their communities?
Yeah, so particularly in Wales, there's a great Armed Forces Covenant website, which is provided by Welsh Government. I've got a Facebook page of the Armed Forces Commissioner of Wales. I am on social media, but there's also a plethora of great charities out there in Wales that work in the armed forces space, and if you put in wherever you are in Wales and stick into a search engine Veterans Hub, there'll be a Veterans Hub near you, and those are great places to go to initially to find out what's going on in the veteran space in your area. So I would suggest you do that. There's obviously Veterans Gateway, which is being refreshed by the OVA. I think that will that has stagnated a little bit as a portal. I think that will, under the ownership of the OVA, I'm hoping that they will energise that and it can become the go-to resource for the armed forces community and veterans for wherever they are in the UK. They can go onto the Veterans Gateway and find out the services and support that they may need in their local area.
Thanks to our guests, and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this podcast, hit subscribe now. Alternatively, you can support our mission by checking out in the show notes below, where you can rate, donate, or become our mate. Thank you.